The stars outside the window were a distant cold fire, their light traveling across the vast emptiness of space for thousands of years before reaching the aging hull of the Argonaut. The massive warship, once the pride of humanity's fleet, now drifted through the silence like forgotten relic of a bygone age. The long, narrow corridors of the ship echoed with the soft hum of systems barely functioning, a reminder of how far humanity had fallen. Captain Alara Cade stood in front of the observation window, her eyes tracing the slow movements of distant stars, each one holding a memory of lost battles and long-forgotten allies. She had commanded the Argonaut for the past 2 years, but the ship was more than just a command to her. It was a legacy, a symbol of everything humanity had built and lost. In its battered hull lay the key to humanity's salvation, or its final undoing. Ilara's mind wandered back to the discovery of the ship's true purpose, hidden away in the deepest vaults of Earth's military archives. It was an old story, one whispered in the halls of power and dismissed as legend. The Argonaut was not just any warship. It was built around forbidden technology, alien artifacts scavenged from an ancient race that had once ruled the galaxy. The technology had been buried, hidden from the rest of the universe for centuries. Only now, after years of quiet research and dangerous experiments, had humanity unlocked its potential. The first time Alara had seen the Argonaut in full, it had taken her breath away. The ship was a marvel. Sleek lines, glowing runes etched into its surface, and strange symbols whose meaning no one could fully decipher. It hummed with an energy that seemed alive, a power unlike anything Earth had ever known. But the most terrifying part of it all was that humanity had no idea what they were truly dealing with. The artifacts aboard the Argonaut were not just technological marvels. They were keys to a weapon capable of unimaginable destruction. Ilara turned away from the window as the voice of her executive officer, Commander Dorian Vale, cut through the silence. His voice was always calm, but there was an edge of concern in it today. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal from the outpost on Caries 9. It's coming in on a secure channel. Caries 9 was a mining colony on the edge of human-controlled space, and for the past year, it had been one of the few sources of critical resources. If anything were to happen to it, the consequences for Earth would be dire." Ilara nodded. "Patch it through?" The image of a young lieutenant appeared on the screen, his face pale and covered in sweat. "Captain, this is Lieutenant Juno from Caries 9. We're under attack by an unknown fleet. They came out of nowhere. We're outgunned, outnumbered. We don't have much time." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. "Unknown fleet? Are you sure?" "Yes, ma'am. They've already taken out our communications relay, and we can't send a distress signal any further. We're the last line of defense here." Ilara glanced at Dorian, who met her gaze with the same unspoken understanding. The Argonaut had been deployed on patrol, far from Caries 9, but the distress signal was clear, and the need for action was even clearer. "Lieutenant," Ilara said, her voice hardening, "hold your position. We're coming to assist. Prepare the colony's defenses as best you can." "We'll do what we can, Captain, but I don't know how much longer we can hold out," the lieutenant replied before the transmission cut off. Ilara turned to Dorian. "Set course for Caries 9. Full speed." "Understood," Dorian said, his fingers moving quickly across the console. "We're on our way." As the Argonaut roared to life and began its journey toward the distant colony, Ilara couldn't help but feel the weight of what was happening. An unknown fleet? The last time humanity had faced such an overwhelming force was during the initial galactic wars, where alliances were shattered and planets lost. But this time, there was no coalition, no army of allies to back them up. There were only the remnants of a human fleet that still clung to life, and the power of the forbidden warship that now raced through the void. The ship's engines hummed with the power of 1,000 suns as they sped through hyperspace. The crew was silent, each one aware of the gravity of the situation. Ilara stood in command center, her gaze fixed on the view screen as they neared the edge of Caries 9's atmosphere. The outpost was now visible, a small, fragile thing against a vast expanse of space. But it was under attack, its weak shields flickering like a candle in the wind. "We're coming in hot, Captain," Dorian said. "We'll be within firing range in 2 minutes." Ilara nodded, her grip tightening on the armrest of her seat, weapons at the ready, prepare to engage as soon as we're within range. The Argonaut was a ship of legends, but Alara had never faced a battle quite like this. Her orders had always been about patrolling or safeguarding colonies, not rushing into combat with unknown enemies. And yet, the enemy was already here, waiting for them, lying in ambush. As they broke through the last layers of atmosphere, Alara's eyes locked onto the unknown fleet. Massive, sleek ships unlike anything humanity had encountered before. Their design was alien, their purpose inscrutable. There was no time to decipher their origins or tactics. Only one thing mattered: survival. The first shots rang out across the battlefield as the Argonaut's weapon systems activated. Energy blasts collided with the enemy's ships, but the unknown fleet retaliated with frightening speed. The Argonaut shuddered under the first volley, but its shields absorbed the impact. Alara gritted her teeth and made a snap decision: target their lead ship, concentrate all firepower on it. Dorian's hands flew across the console as the ship's main cannons powered up, firing a devastating blast at the nearest enemy vessel. It exploded in a bright flash, sending debris scattering across the void. Alara felt a surge of hope. But then, something unexpected happened. A second wave of enemy ships appeared from behind a nearby asteroid field, flanking them on all sides. The Argonaut sensors whined as new readings flooded in, showing more ships than the fleet had ever expected. The odds were now stacked against them, and Alara could feel the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. "Captain, the enemy is regrouping," Dorian reported, his voice tense. "They've adapted to our tactics. We need a new strategy." Alara's mind raced. The Argonaut was powerful, but the sheer number of enemies made the situation increasingly dire. She knew that in order to win this battle, they would need to tap into the one weapon that had been forbidden by the military council, the weapon they had kept hidden, the technology that could either save humanity or destroy it. "Prepare to activate the FTX-13 module," Alara commanded, her voice cold with resolve. "It's time we use the forbidden technology." The crew fell silent at the mention of the FTX-13. No one had dared even speak of it, let alone use it. But desperate times call for desperate measures. "Are you sure, Captain?" Dorian asked, his voice wary. "If we activate it, there's no going back. The consequences could—" "I'm aware," Alara interrupted, her gaze hard. "We fight to survive. We fight for the future of humanity." With a deep breath, Alara turned back to the view screen, watching the enemy fleet advance like a swarm of locusts. The time for caution was long past. They had no choice but to use the forbidden technology and fight back with everything they had. And so, with the flick of a switch, the FTX-13 module hummed to life. The power that surged through the Argonaut was unlike anything the crew had ever felt. The ship's systems, enhanced by the ancient alien technology, came online with an eerie calm. The weapons, one standard issue, now pulsed with a deadly force that could level entire fleets. The battle had only just begun. The energy coursing through the Argonaut felt like the pulse of a living creature, its heart pounding with the terrifying potential of the forbidden technology. The FTX-13 module hummed low beneath the decks, a dark promise that both thrilled and terrified the crew. Alara stood at the command console, her hand steady despite the weight of the decision she had just made. Behind her, the tension in the bridge was palpable as everyone awaited the next move. The unknown enemy, a force whose origin remained a mystery, was regrouping. Their ships, sleek and impossibly agile, moved with precision that hinted at a strategic mind behind them. The Argonaut, by comparison, was an ancient warship, massive, cumbersome, and deeply outclassed by the speed and agility of the alien fleet. Yet, with the power of the FTX-13 module now active, the game had changed. "Captain," Dorian Vale's voice broke through her thoughts. He stood beside her, his sharp gaze focused on the tactical display. "We're fully powered. The FTX-13 is online and ready. But we need to be precise. This power, it's dangerous." Alara turned to face him, her expression hard. "We're not fighting for victory, Dorian. We're fighting to survive. This ship may be our last hope." A deep rumble vibrated through the hull of the Argonaut, as if the ship itself was aware of what was at stake. Outside the viewport, the enemy fleet hung like a swarm of dark metal vultures. They had been circling for hours, waiting for the right moment to strike. It was clear now they had underestimated humanity's resolve, and they were about to pay the price. Illyria's voice rang out, commanding and unwavering. Target the largest enemy vessel. Prepare for the first strike. We'll show them the full power of the FTX-13. The tactical display highlighted the largest ship in the alien fleet, a towering fortress of gleaming black metal. Its massive energy shield shimmered like a barrier, almost impenetrable to traditional weapons. But the FTX-13, humanity's last resort, had a different nature entirely. It was built on technology that had been acquired. No, stolen. From an ancient alien civilization, a power source that could overwhelm the most advanced shields in the galaxy. Dorian's fingers moved swiftly, his expression unreadable. Captain, if we fire this, it will send a signal throughout the entire fleet. They'll know exactly what we're capable of. Let them know, Illyria replied, her voice steely. It's time they learned the price of underestimating humanity. With a low hum that reverberated throughout the ship, the Argonaut's energy cannons powered up, drawing their strength from the FTX-13 module. The bridge lights flickered as the weapon systems aligned, the vast potential of the FTX-13 locking onto the enemy ship's core. Every crew member held their breath, knowing the risk of what they were about to do. Firing, Dorian said quietly, his voice filled with a strange mixture of awe and fear. His finger hovered above the console, and for a brief moment, the entire ship held still. Then, the Argonaut fired. The blast was unlike anything humanity had ever witnessed. The cannon's energy pulsed with a deep, guttural roar, sending a beam of searing light across the void. It struck the alien flagship with the force of a dying star, tearing through its shields as if they were paper. The flagship, once a symbol of the enemy's superiority, disintegrated in a magnificent explosion, scattering debris like a burst of fireworks across the stars. The Argonaut shuddered as the weapon's recoil rattled the ship to its core, but had done its job. The enemy flagship was no more, and with it, a shockwave of panic spread throughout the remaining alien fleet. Illyria allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. They had struck first, and the enemy had felt the full force of humanity's defiance. But even as she stared at the destroyed ship, a sickening thought gnawed at her mind. The Argonaut's attack was only the beginning. The FTX-13 was powerful, yes, but it had consequences. And now, the rest of the fleet would come for them with a fury unlike anything they had ever seen. All ships, prepare for counterattack, Illyria commanded, her voice a sharp contrast to the moment of victory. Target their engines, disable their fleet, but do not destroy them unless we must. Dorian turned to her, his face pale as the magnitude of their situation sank in. Captain, the FTX-13, it's still drawing too much power. We have to power it down before we risk overloading the systems. Illyria's gaze never wavered from the view screen. The remaining enemy vessels, smaller and more agile, began to regroup. They knew now the danger of humanity's warship, and they would come at them with everything they had. It was clear that a reprisal was imminent. We'll use it one more time, Illyria said. Power it up. We'll make this count. With no time to spare, the Argonaut's weapon systems began charging again, this time aimed at the next wave of ships. The FTX-13 hummed ominously beneath the floorboards, as though it too understood the power it contained and the devastation it could unleash. But just as the ship prepared to unleash its full might once more, an unexpected transmission came through. This is Admiral Lyras of the Elysians. Stand down, Captain Cade. Your actions have drawn the attention of the entire galaxy. The transmission was sharp, cold. A chill ran down Illyria's spine as she recognized the voice. Admiral Lyras had once been a member of the Elysian High Command, one of the few who had advocated for the alliance with humanity. Yet here he was, now commanding the very fleet that humanity had once called allies. You betrayed us, Illyria spat, her voice filled with a deep, bitter anger. Your people turned on us, and now you come to threaten us with the full force of your fleet. We had no choice. Lyra's replied, his tone regretful but firm. "The technology you've uncovered. It's far too dangerous. Humanity was never meant to wield such power." Illyra's jaw clenched. The very people who had once stood at humanity's side now turned their backs in fear of the same technology they had helped bury. The FDX-13 was not just a weapon. It was an ancient artifact, and humanity had awakened it from its slumber. The Elysians were afraid, and in their fear, they had sought to control what they could not understand. "Your betrayal was not just an act of war, Admiral," Illyra said, her eyes narrowing. "It was an act of cowardice, and now you'll pay the price for it." The Argonauts' cannons powered up again, their deadly energy thrumming beneath her feet. Illyra's resolve hardened. She was no longer fighting for survival alone. She was fighting for humanity's place in the galaxy. No longer would they cower before ancient alien empires. No longer would they accept being subjugated. The countdown began. The FDX-13 hummed louder, its power surging as the Argonaut prepared for another strike. Illyra's finger hovered over the console. The moment to strike back was now. But just as she was about to give the order, the transmission cut off, replaced by a garbled series of unknown signals. The enemy fleet, once poised for retaliation, had stopped in its tracks. Something else was happening. "Commander, look," Dorian said, pointing at the display. A new fleet was emerging from the far side of the system. Massive ships, gleaming with a strange, unfamiliar energy. Humanity's rebellion had just attracted the attention of something far older and far more dangerous than even the Elysians. The tension aboard the Argonaut was palpable as the strange fleet, larger and more formidable than anything humanity had faced before, materialized on the view screen. Its vessels were unlike anything in the known galaxy, their designs unfamiliar and their sheer scale staggering. The ships radiated an ominous energy that sent a chill down the spines of the crew. There was no identifying insignia, no signs of any known species. These were not mere ships. They were relics, ancient in design, as though crafted by a civilization lost to the sands of time. Illyra stood rigidly, staring at the new fleet, trying to comprehend the implications of its sudden arrival. She had known the war with the Elysians would be difficult, but this was something else entirely. "Captain, who are they?" Dorian's voice was laced with disbelief as he leaned over the console, examining the unfamiliar ships. "They're not Elysian. These signatures don't match anything in our database." Illyra's mind raced as she considered the possibilities. A new enemy, one that had emerged from the shadows of the galaxy? Or perhaps a forgotten race, resurrected from the depths of history? Either way, this new fleet was too much of a threat to ignore. "Keep us on course for Carries 9, she ordered, her voice sharp. "We can't afford to abandon the colony now. We need to deal with this later." Dorian hesitated, clearly unsure. "But Captain, if this fleet isn't here to help us, we're facing an entirely new war. Shouldn't we engage them now while we have the advantage?" "Not yet," Illyra replied, her voice firm but filled with a quiet concern. "If we draw their attention now, we risk provoking them into a full-scale engagement. Let's wait until we have more information. We need to focus on protecting Carries 9. Her orders were clear, but inside, Illyra's mind was in turmoil. The battle at Carries 9 was far from over, and now this new fleet, whatever it was an unknown variable that could turn the tide of the war. They couldn't afford to make the wrong move. As the Argonaut closed in on the mining colony, Illyra stared at the view screen, her eyes scanning the vast unknown ships now lurking at the edge of the system. If the technology aboard the Argonaut had drawn the attention of these mysterious vessels, then humanity had unwittingly become the centerpiece of a much larger game. What if these ships were part of a greater power, one that had been dormant for centuries, watching, waiting for the right moment to emerge? Suddenly, a new transmission came through on the communications channel. This time, the signal was not from the Elysians, but from a ship that had just appeared in the distance, bearing the unmistakable insignia of humanity's long-lost allies. A military flagship, the pride of Earth, a ship thought to be destroyed in the earlier war with the Elysians, was broadcasting a familiar signal. Illyra's breath caught in her throat. "Patch it through," she commanded. The image that appeared on the screen was a familiar face. Admiral Kessler, leader of the Earth Fleet's command, who had supposedly perished in the final days of the war. Captain Cade, if you're seeing this, then we're in the same storm. Kessler's gruff voice came through, accompanied by the static of a damaged transmission. There's much you don't know about these invaders. They're not just alien. They've been hiding in the deep voids of space, watching us for eons. This isn't the first time they've made their move, but this time they've come for us all. Illyra's eyes widened, her mind racing. Admiral Kessler, what do you mean? Who are they? What do they want? The transmission flickered as the ship's connection was strained, but Kessler's eyes remained sharp, his voice unwavering. They're the Mother, a race as old as the stars themselves. We thought we had wiped them out during the ancient wars, but they've been hiding in the dark corners of the galaxy. Now they're coming back, and they're bringing a force unlike anything we've ever seen. Illyra, clench your fists. The Mother, an ancient race, mentioned only in the most forbidden texts of galactic history. Illyra had heard of them only in passing, and never thought to see them in her lifetime. The history books claimed they had disappeared long ago, driven to extinction by a coalition of species who banded together to crush their genocidal war efforts. But now they were back. The implications were staggering. If the Mother were returning, then humanity had stumbled into something far larger than they had anticipated. It wasn't just about surviving against the Elysians anymore. This was a battle for the very survival of the galaxy. Captain, Dorian interrupted, his voice filled with urgency. The enemy fleet is on the move. They're changing course, heading straight for Carries 9. If we don't intervene, the colony will be obliterated before we can even make it to the surface. Illyra turned to him, her mind racing. Carries 9 was humanity's last line of defense in this corner of space. If it fell, there would be nothing left to stop the Elysians or the Mother from overrunning humanity's most vital resources. Full speed ahead. Bring us into orbit around Carries 9. Prepare all weapons. This time we fight to win. The Argonaut surged forward, its powerful engines roaring as the warship accelerated toward the colony. But as they drew closer to Carries 9, Illyra noticed something chilling. The fleet of alien ships, their strange, otherworldly designs now unmistakably clear, had already begun their assault. A wave of energy blasts pummeled the colony's defense systems, sending shockwaves rippling across the surface. We can't hold them off. Lieutenant Solis, the ship's weapons officer, yelled, her hands flying over the controls. We can, Illyra said, though her voice was filled with grim determination. Activate the FTX-13. Dorian looked at her with hesitation. Captain, it's too dangerous. The FTX-13 was designed to be a last resort. It's not meant for prolonged use. We risk blowing the Argonaut apart if we fire again. I know, Illyra said, but it's the only chance we have. She turned to Dorian, her eyes hard with resolve. Fire. The FTX-13 hummed with ominous power as it charged up again. The Argonaut trembled under the immense energy, but Illyra stood firm. The unknown alien fleet had made a mistake by underestimating humanity. They hadn't just come for resources. They had come for the last vestiges of a species unwilling to bow to oppression. With a mighty roar, the FTX-13 fired once again. The energy surged to the Argonaut and out into the void, a beam of pure destructive power that collided with the alien flagship. The ship shuddered as the blast made contact, tearing through its shields and ripping through its hull. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The void was still, save for scattering debris of the flagship. But the battle wasn't over. More ships emerged from the shadows, and the Mother fleet, shattered but far from defeated, launched a counterattack. Their tactics were unpredictable, alien, their ships weaving through the chaos with unnatural precision. Humanity had taken the first blow, but the Mother had learned their lesson. They weren't just another alien race to be eradicated. They were an extinction-level threat. Illyra's gaze hardened as the Argonaut roared into the fray once more. There was no turning back. This war, it seemed, had only just begun. The Argonaut plunged into the fray, its weapon systems crackling with raw energy. Outside, the galaxy's vast expanse trembled with the intensity of the battle. The Mothra fleet, while battered, was relentless in its counterattack. The alien warships, with their strange organic designs, weaved through the chaos like predators hunting their prey. They had not expected the Argonaut to strike back so fiercely, but now that they knew the true power of humanity's forbidden weapon, they had no intention of losing the upper hand. Illyra's fingers gripped the command chair, her knuckles white as she watched the battle unfold. The Argonaut had managed to take down several Mothra vessels, but the alien fleet was far from broken. In fact, their tactics had changed. They had stopped making broad, sweeping attacks. Instead, they launched concentrated strikes, focusing on her ship's weaknesses. Shields are holding at 60%, Captain, but we can't take much more of this, Lieutenant Solis shouted from the weapons console. Illyra's mind raced as the Argonaut shook with each blast. They couldn't keep up this pace. The FDX-13 had given them an edge, but at a cost. The ship's power reserves were draining fast, and even the FTX-13's immense energy couldn't keep the Argonaut in the fight forever. "Prepare to fire the FDX-13 again," Illyra ordered, though her voice betrayed a hint of uncertainty. "But this time, aim for the heart of their fleet. We need to break their formation." As Dorian moved to engage the systems, Illyra's mind flicked back to the transmission they had received from Admiral Kessler. His warnings echoed in her ears. The Mothra have been hiding in the shadows for centuries. They're not like anything you've faced before. Their strength is not just in numbers, but in their adaptability. They will keep coming, no matter what you throw at them. Her fingers drummed against the console, but she couldn't afford to think about what Kessler had said now. Time was running out. If they didn't take down the Mothra fleet soon, they wouldn't be able to defend Carries 9, let alone humanity's future. Dorian's voice snapped her back to reality. "FDX-13 charge and ready, Captain. Targeting their flagship." "Fire," Illyra commanded. The Argonaut's energy cannons fired again, a searing beam of destructive power that surged through space and crashed into the Mothra flagship. For a brief moment, it looked like they might have succeeded. The ship's shields flickered, and then the hull began to crack, the exterior writhing with pulses of energy as the FDX-13 tore through it. The Mothra flagship staggered, its form disintegrating as debris scattered into the void. But the victory was short-lived. Another ship, even larger and more ominous than the first, emerged from behind the wreckage. It was the Mothra's true flagship, a colossal vessel with no visible weapons, but an energy field pulsing around it, dark and oppressive. The Mothra fleet seemed to coalesce around this new ship, their movements synchronized with terrifying precision. This was their heart, their command center, and with it, they were more powerful than before. "They've adapted," Dorian muttered, his voice thick with disbelief. "They've cloaked their flagship. We can't lock onto it with conventional targeting systems." "We don't need to," Illyra said sharply. "Activate the FDX-13 again. I don't care about the risks anymore. We have one shot to end this." Dorian hesitated. "Captain, the FDX-13's power reserves are almost depleted. We don't have the energy to keep firing like this." Illyra turned to him, her expression fierce. "We have to take the risk. We're running out of options." With a reluctant nod, Dorian moved to power up the FDX-13 again. As the module hummed to life, Illyra gripped the armrest of her chair, her breath slow and steady, focusing only on the task at hand. The Argonaut was already in the heart of enemy territory, and this would either be their salvation or their doom. Outside the ship, the Mothra fleet closed in. Their ships moved as one, a dark wave crashing toward the Argonaut. But Illyra didn't flinch. She had been preparing for this moment since the first shot was fired. Humanity had fought for survival for centuries, and now, with the Argonaut's forbidden technology, they would have their chance to strike back. The FDX-13 reached its full power, its energy coursing to the ship like an unstoppable force. Illyra took a breath and gave the command. "Fire." The beam that erupted from the Argonaut's cannons was unlike anything seen before. The FDX-13's energy surged, amplifying the weapon's power 100-fold. It streaked through space like a comet, its light cutting through the Mothra fleet like a blade through flesh. The flagship's shields flared in resistance, but they were no match for the concentrated force of the FDX-13. With a deafening explosion, the flagship's energy core shattered, sending shockwaves through the entire fleet. The Mothra ships were thrown into disarray, their formations collapsing as the heart of their power crumbled. But even as the flagship disintegrated into dust, the Mothra were not done. Their ships, now leaderless and scattered, began to regroup. They were wounded, but not defeated. Illyria's heart raced. They had dealt a devastating blow, but the Mothra fleet still held the advantage in numbers. Even worse, the Argonaut was near the limits of its endurance. The battle had stretched them to their breaking point. "Captain," Dorian said, his voice tight with urgency, "we're not going to survive this unless we make a move now. If we don't retreat and regroup, we'll be overwhelmed." Illyria's mind whirled. The Mothra would regroup, no doubt. They had proven themselves adaptable, and there was no telling what kind of reinforcements they might call in. For the first time in a long while, Illyria felt the crushing weight of command. Her options were running out, and time was slipping away. "We can't retreat." "Not yet," she said, her voice firm despite the rising panic. "We need to disable their fleet, not just scatter it. We have to find a way to break their will completely." Dorian's gaze never left the screen. "What do you propose?" Illyria thought for a moment, her eyes scanning the battlefield. Then a flicker of an idea sparked in her mind. "There's a chance," she said slowly. "We can lure their fleet into a trap. We know they're using a central command vessel to coordinate their forces. If we can deceive them into thinking we're retreating, we can draw them into a position where the FDX-13 can finish what we started. We have one shot to wipe them out completely." A deadly silence filled the bridge. Dorian finally nodded. "It's a risky play, but it's the only option we've got." Illyria turned to crew, her eyes burning with determination. "Get ready. We're going to make them chase us. And when they do, we'll hit them with everything we've got." The Argonaut began to shift course, its engines powering down slightly to mimic the movements of a ship retreating in defeat. The Mothra fleet, sensing victory, took the bait, moving to encircle the Argonaut. It was a trap, but one that would require every ounce of the ship's remaining power to execute. Illyria felt the pulse of the FDX-13 once more as the Argonaut prepared for the final strike. The Mothra might have thought they had won, but they had underestimated humanity's ability to fight back, and Illyria was about to show them just how deadly a corner human could be. The Argonaut was on the brink. Its systems were strained, its hull battered, but its crew, resilient and determined, had one final chance to change the tide of the war. As the Mothra fleet closed in, Illyria watched the command console, her breath steady and measured despite the chaos surrounding her. This was the moment when every decision made in the past few days would either lead to salvation or destruction. The final play had been set into motion, and there was no turning back now. The Mothra, having tasted what they believed to be victory, were beginning to close their formation, tightening their grip around the Argonaut. Their ships, though scattered, still moved with purpose, as if they were closing on prey, oblivious of the traps set before them. "We're in position, Captain." Dorian's voice broke through the tension, his hands dancing across the controls. "Their fleet is almost within range of the trap." Illyria nodded, her gaze unwavering. "Initiate Phase 2. Activate the FDX-13. The energy coursing through the ship once more hummed to life as the forbidden technology powered up. The Argonaut systems were stretched to their limits, but it was now or never. The enemy fleet was just within firing range. The timing had to be perfect. "Now, Dorian," Illyria commanded. With a violent surge, the FDX-13 unleashed its full force, firing a beam of pure destructive power that cut through the Mothra fleet like a knife through butter. The first few ships were obliterated in an instant, their hulks disintegrating in a flash of brilliant light. But even as the blast decimated their front lines, the Mothra began to retaliate. Their ships, despite the chaos, responded with calculated precision. The Mothra were relentless. No amount of destruction seemed to faze them. But this time, they were unprepared. The Argonaut had used the explosion of their front lines to create an opening, a chance to strike at the core of their command. "The flagship is exposed," shouted Lieutenant Solis from the weapons console. "We've got a clear shot at their command vessel. Should we engage?" Yes, Ilara said, her voice a low growl. Take it down. We end this now. The final shot from the Argonaut was launched, a massive pulse of energy that collided with the Mothra flagship. This time, the FTX-13's power broke through the defenses, tearing apart the heart of the fleet. The flagship disintegrated in a cataclysmic explosion, sending shockwaves throughout the remaining Mothra ships. The fleet faltered. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, chaos erupted. The Mothra, their central command lost, began to panic. Ships broke formation, and disarray rippled through their ranks. The Argonaut, fueled by the power of the FTX-13, pressed forward, its energy cannons firing with deadly accuracy, destroying any remaining vessels that posed a threat. It was a massacre, but it was necessary. Humanity's fate was at stake. Ilara, exhausted but resolute, watched the Mothra fleet crumble. Their invasion had failed, and humanity, against all odds, had survived. But victory, she knew, had come at a high cost. The Argonaut was battered, and its power reserves were nearly depleted. The FTX-13 had given them the strength to win, but had drained them just as much as it had empowered them. The question now was, what would come next? Captain, Dorian said, breaking her reverie, we've done it. The Mothra fleet is in retreat. Ilara took a deep breath, her body aching from the tension and the relentless battle. Yes, she said, her voice steady but hollow. We've won, but we've only just begun. The Mothra were just the first of many threats lurking in the dark corners of this galaxy. This war isn't over, not by a long shot. Dorian nodded. So what now? Ilara turned toward the stars, the light of distant galaxies flickering in the vast expanse. Now we rebuild. We rebuild humanity's place in the stars, and we face whatever comes next together. We've proven that we can survive, but this war has shown us just how fragile our existence is. We must remain vigilant, because if we don't, the price of survival may be too high to bear. With that, the Argonaut slowly began its journey toward Carries 9. The warship, battered and scarred, was not the only thing that needed repairs. Humanity itself had been tested, its resolve, its strength, its ability to fight back. The Mothra had been a wake-up call, a reminder that no victory was ever truly guaranteed. And as Ilara Cade gazed out into the infinite expanse, she knew the battle for future humanity was far from over.